Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome all of you to this session. It's both a follow-up of the formal session that took place at 1 o'clock today, Central European Time, about the formal presentation of the World Water Development Report 2021 on valuing water. But it's also, probably even more importantly, a follow-up to the listening exercise we did with as many people as we could to hear what your take is on the value and valuing water. So we're extremely happy to see the young and the older men and women. We are not using any titles because we think this should be informal. It's about you, not about us. And we're here to listen. We have a few, we think, interesting people to participate in our panels. We have a few interesting people to introduce you to the topic. And we think there is high diversity here, both in terms of men and women, but also in terms of stakeholder groups, major groups, and other stakeholders, as they're called in the UN system. The first one we hope to hear from is Aart van der Horst, the representative of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And I hope he will be able to join us shortly. But before we do that, we'd like to involve you in a little what you must be familiar with by now, a little cloud exercise. So I'm asking my wonderful ladies to bring it up, the question, and allow for people to bring up their comments. Use one word. What is the value for you? So try and do it in one word, and we'll come back to it a little later. And it's very obvious. Two of them take the lead: life and health and equity. Okay, I think this should be more or less it. And I'm going to end the cloud now. And I think most of you have seen basically loads of references we'll all come back to. Still not sure why our friends from the Netherlands are not there yet. So not to lose too much time, what I will do is first call on Marlos de Souza, who works for FAO, who is, I would say, one of the big champions of water and the connection to agriculture. He's speaking to us from Brazil at the moment because of COVID. He couldn't go back to Italy again. And he is going to try and talk us through what the conclusions of the listening exercise were, and see for all of us to listen to where they coincide or not coincide with what the experts and the academics made of it. So, my dear friend Marlos, thank you again for being available, and the floor is completely yours.
Thank you, Lesha. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening for all of you. And yes, so my presentation is there. So thank you for the invitation, Lesha, to be here to talk about the exercise we did. So for the colleagues attending the event today, so FAO had the pleasure almost 3 years ago to propose this theme for the 2021 World Water Development Report. And really, I did have the pleasure to be the one from FAO proposing it. And why I did it? So I did it because of my experience working in Australia for the Australian government. And, working with the Aboriginal people of Australia to understand that they do also have the rights for water allocation. They do have their own needs, the religious needs and the cultural needs of the Aboriginal people. So it's changed a lot my way of seeing things and understanding water management. So in almost 3 years ago, we did approve this thing for the 2021 report. And the idea was really to catch, these different views on how the value of water for everyone. The idea was really to go through the different parts of not about the economy, but about being an average person on the street. For those that they do like or do love to go to a river system, for example, for swimming, for fishing, or just for sitting around and enjoying the landscape. So the idea really was to capture, these whole different views of the community outside there. And I think for us as a group of UN Water members and partners, when we first started discussing about how to do it, how to capture the views of people of all around the world, I think we deep dived into this approach or new methodology that we have never used before in our UN Water process, which was to use the social media and trying to get to everyone and to capture all of those different views. So what we decided to do was what we call the listen exercise. So we want to listen from you all, from all of you, not just from member states, from the United Nations system, not only from governments, not only from state governments or government officials, or the academia as the usual was what we do, but we want to listen to you all, to all people involved, to all communities, to people from everywhere. So this was a kind of a very challenging process for us, how to put it in place. But thank you for a very good team of communicators from different agencies and partners of UN Water. We were able to come up with this listening exercise through the social media. And then we did start this campaign called, Water to Me. So the idea is really to capture all the views, different views of people all around the world. I think the little exercise we just did before we start the session today showed that even for 184 people that we do have now in the meeting, we have a lot of different views about what it means for us. So what water means for us. So it was very important for us really to develop this approach and to implement it, which was not easy. Was a very complex exercise, even because it was the first time ever that we as UN Water, we did it. So, but I think it showed very good results, and probably, I hope, and we hope, that UN Water is going to continue doing that into the future. So the discussions and conversations on social media generates more than 6,000 social media conversations on blogs, Instagram, news, Facebook, Twitter, and so on. So the idea was really to take this discussion and the participation of everyone as far as possible, that we could reach, all parts of the globe. I remember some colleagues, Lesha, always bring the importance of, getting those that they didn't have access, for example, to social media. So then we did our best to create email address for people to send their views and their positions, their ideas, their stories, for us to capture all of those different views, which was great. So in total, we reached out to almost 140 million potential impressions. So in different languages of the United Nations, as well as different languages that they are not official languages of the United Nations. So 140 countries involved in this whole process, and seeing a lot of interest coming from Africa was really good. To see that Africa was engaged in those discussions, you know, and even over some of the traditional countries from Europe, for example. So it was really a very comprehensive exercise that we did. The response from the community was great, and it was great to see the engagement and participation of all. So during this process, we captured a number of different, you know, phrases and keywords. I think some of them we just did reflect here in this first exercise between ourselves here, but we saw a lot of interaction between people and the different views they have in terms of the value of water. I think it was, for me personally, was great to see it because it went really the same way I was thinking about when I first proposed this theme for the World Water Development Report, was to get, you know, different views of the importance of water for us and the importance of water for our lives. So it was good to see, you know, the different people involved and different ideas and different words related to water. So then what people said during this process, you know, the most common was protecting water is everyone's responsibility. I think it's great. In a country like Australia, where we do have a very limited resource in Australia in terms of water, and where the government and the people of Australia, they try to do their best in terms of managing the resource themselves and sharing responsibilities. It's good to see that we don't rely only on governments, for us to see our responsibility and our part in this process. So what is life? I think it was, you know, the most common one in our exercise here today. What is human rights? Something that we, from the United Nations, we have been pushing a lot for countries to acknowledge that water is a human right and everyone has a right to access water, clean and safe water. So what is life for the environment, which is important. Coming from a country now, so I was born in Brazil, but I moved to Australia many, many years ago, to see that the interaction between the environment and the ecosystems, that now we give proper knowledge and acknowledgement of the importance of water and the ecosystems and the environment to provide ecosystem service to us. So I think is increasing. We are not there yet, in my views, but we're gonna get there. One day, I think we're gonna get to a point where we'll recognize the importance of the environment and the ecosystems, and have a table where we can share, you know, all the seats with all the water users, including the environment. And the last one, you know, there will be no food without water. So this is a joke that I make with my friends from FAO, my colleagues, especially the soil scientists, saying that I can produce food without soil, but I cannot produce food without water. So it's extremely important. And the most frequent topic we discussed, water management and water scarcity. I think, you know, those are two common elements in all discussions we have. It's good to see the communities reflecting it as well, and really to understand, you know, that they do play a vital role in this process. Not just about governments, it's about people managing water in a better way, in a shared responsibility between all of us, to avoid, you know, water scarcity, not only because we don't have enough water. Some places we do have enough water, but the quality of water is so poor that we cannot use the water for the purpose that we want. So it's also something is also about water scarcity. Scarcity is not just about physical limitation or lack of water. It's also about having the resource, but not the quality that we need, or having the resource and the quality we need, but not the infrastructure important for us to distribute water. So two important elements. So what else we can conclude from this process? From us, I think was really a great experience to have this contact with the community outside there, especially for the UN Water family, but for UN agencies, to be able to listen to people from, an average person from the streets of Rome, from the streets of Bolivia, Brazil, Africa, everywhere. It was important for us really to do this exercise to listen from you what you think about the importance of water, the value of water, which, as I said, the intention was never just about the economic value of water, was really to reflect all the values of water for everyone. So I think we achieved this intention, the purpose of this process, and we hope that the UN Water family is going to take it for the next World Water Development Report. So thank you very much, Lesha. Thank you for the time, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Marlos, for this, I would say, wonderful lecture on how it works or doesn't work. And I do hope with you that this is something that we can expand on in the future, to make sure that it's the different languages, the different emotions that in the end should shape our actions and our measures. Okay, then Art, I am immediately going to give you the floor. We have just heard already the presentation of Marlos, where we had a little bit of a connection issue. But please, Art, as a representative of the Dutch government and such a big supporter of valuing water, please give us your thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Lesha, and sorry for the inconvenience caused by the delay with the Zoom, because Zoom is not allowed on my computer from work, so I have to arrange something. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the theme of 2021 is valuing water. As a member of the UN high-level panel on water, that was one of the countries to put valuing water high on the agenda in 2018. As a follow-up, the Netherlands is hosting the Valuing Water Initiative. The initiative promotes the following 5 principles of valuing water. The first principle, recognize and embrace water's multiple values. The second principle, reconcile values and build trust. The third one, protect the sources. The fourth one, educate to empower. And the fifth one, invest and innovate. The Netherlands appreciates the attention for valuing water in the World Water Development Report 2021 and the listening exercise #WaterToMe. We believe they both contribute highly to apply the principles of valuing water, broadening our understanding and giving a voice to people everywhere. Water has a great value for health, education, culture, peace, environment, food, and forestry. SDG 6 is to ensure water and sanitation for all. Without the comprehensive understanding of water's true multidimensional value, we will be unable to safeguard this critical resource for the benefit of everyone now and for future generations. You may know already the main recommendation of the World Water Development Report. I'm now looking forward to hearing the results of the online consultation. Are the experts, the UN system, and non-state actors, civil society, agreeing or disagreeing? In any case, we will learn from it, especially from the great case descriptions that will be published online. You will probably conclude with us that there is not a big gap between the conclusions of the formal reports and the outcomes of the online consultation. What we do see is how important it is that language and jargon is understood. People feel heard, and so people can act on it. We would like to see more social resilience building in the water domain, and the exercise done with #WaterToMe is an important contribution to that. I would like to thank especially Women for Water and Aquafed and all their partners for organizing this session. On behalf of my government, I wish you a great experience and hope to see all of you joining in the effort of giving from your own perspective water its proper value. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Art. And as you might have realized, we have just heard the summary from Marlos on the report. So I will hope that we can convey that back to you again on the recording. And please stay on as long as you can and listen to the discussion. So with having all of that said, I would like to hand over to my esteemed colleague, David Boyce, to introduce the first group of people to respond and the first panel. David, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Lesha. My name is David Boyce with Public Services International, which is a global trade union federation founded in 1907 and representing about 30 million working women and men in 160 countries. 65% of our members are women, in part because public services provide more readily open doors to women. So look, for us, we represent a lot of the workers in water, and the pandemic as a global crisis should serve to galvanize us to rebuild the world we need better than the one we had before, indicating a number of lessons, including for the climate crisis, and with water in a central position, essential for all human activities. And what we notice is that governments can move with urgency, as they're doing with the pandemic. But in the water sector, we have lots of really good words, but a continued lack of action. This listening exercise was a challenge for all of us. And I want to congratulate UN Water members, the agencies, the task force, and especially the staff behind this effort. It was quite amazing. This first panel, I'm honored to be moderating, and I'll try to get out of the way as soon as possible, is comprised of the following 4 people. And if I massacre your name, my apologies. But Tanja Miskova is the ambassador in charge of water diplomacy at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Slovenia. She served as Director General for Multilateral Affairs and Development Cooperation, as Head of Department for Emerging Challenges, and as Ambassador to Egypt. And I guess, Ambassador Miskova, even though we said we wouldn't use titles, let me put the first microphone to you. Were the messages in either of the reports of a surprise to you, assuming you've had a chance to look at the big World Water Day report? And what were the most interesting aspects of the report, please, Ms. Miskova?
Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. Yes, I managed to read the summary of the report because it's 150 pages. It was published today, so that's all I got to do. And of course, the summary, the listening exercise, and the fact that in both water management, or I'd say water governance, was put in the forefront, of course, is no surprise. as in all aspects related to water. I mean, they all boil down to the issue of governance. What maybe I'll just highlight some interesting points. Some were already mentioned in the event before. The fact that the participants were, there were more men than women, but what surprises me more that there were very little young people participating in the exercise, and I'm wondering why is that? But on the other hand, when I listen to professors from our engineering faculties saying that there is every year less and less young people who are willing to study water engineering, maybe this is less surprising. And it also may indicate another issue. The youth are very much engaged on climate change, very vocal on climate change, and climate change in 80% reflects on the water cycle. So obviously there is still lack of recognition of this nexus between water and climate change. This is what I deducted from this, but maybe I'm seeing it wrong. And another interesting point in the listening exercise was the mention of virtual water, which is a very interesting topic, a relevant topic, which doesn't appear so much in the report itself, on the World Water Development Report. And interesting was also the reference to the need to reduce food waste as a way to reduce water usage in agriculture. This is again something which doesn't appear in the World Water Development Report. And I was happy to hear that there was a very lively discussion on the issue of water as a commodity, and also in the panel preceding this one, there was some very clear points made to the fact that water should not be treated as a commodity, but as a human right available to all. And there's just one more aspect that I would like to point out, which is in the report, but not so much in the listening exercise, is the relevance for water for peace and cooperation. And that is something which is very close to my heart and is often missing from the discussions. I'll stop here. Thank you, David.
Thanks. I'm not going to let you stop because I'm going to ask you the second question as well. Because do people and decision makers have a common understanding of the value of water? And given that you're in the government and therefore you are part of the decision making, do you guys have the same understanding as the rest of us, simple people?
It depends on the decision making and the decision makers.
Is that your answer?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult question because I really think it depends on the country, on the level of decision makers, and it really depends. I wouldn't, it could be a very wide topic for a discussion, but it's important for decision makers, if they want to do good governance, to take into account all the values of water. So to embrace a comprehensive, integrated, multi-stakeholder, inclusive approach. This is the only one that works
including a lesson for the finance ministers whose job is always to say, no, you can't have any money. Thanks very much, Ms. Miskova. Hazmik Barsegyan is a professional in environmental management with a focus on water and renewable energy. And she is the president of the European Youth for Water. Ms. Barsegyan, can you answer the first two questions as well and share what you think has been missed so far?
Thank you, David, and thank you for the invitation. Good afternoon, everyone. The first question concerning the messages from both reports, I was positively surprised, firstly, for the main message of the listening exercise that everyone is responsible for protecting sources of drinking water. This shows for me the understanding of collective responsibility, which is the first step for better citizen engagement. Because when we open up this message, it means also that everyone, citizens, including young people, can, need, should, and want to have the opportunity to participate and to take the responsibility, and also to participate in the governance. We need to work for a better representation of all citizens and all stakeholders, like citizen groups, young people, women, in water governance to make sure their voice is heard and for a democratic governance of water. For a point about the newly published report, I think it will be, I would like to see more emphasis on this collective democratic governance in the report. Second question, yes, it is about...
I mean, you touched that, do people and decision makers have a common understanding of the value of water? Do you want to see if there's anything new to add on that, please?
Well, let's enter more deeply into the meaning of value of water. Okay, values are basic and fundamental beliefs that guide or motivate attitudes and actions. So they help us to determine what is important to us. And values are the motive behind purposeful action. So value in water describes the qualities we choose to guide our relationship with water, the manner in which we treat water, and our interaction with it in a specific context. So in order to encourage greater prioritization of the protection of freshwater resources and better management of water services, we need to work on fostering this relationship with water. If citizens better understand this relationship, they will participate more, join efforts to solve common challenges. And here, I would like to emphasize the role of youth, young people as actors of change. And they can be like bridges and facilitators of dialogue between citizens and decision makers to make sure that all our aims, like we have the same goal, we want the same thing, but we speak different languages. So the young people can be the bridge to link these different parts of the society, citizen, decision maker, policy experts. Yeah, and I would like to have your support in this section.
Thank you, Hasmik. Of course, the young people are the workers of tomorrow, and we need to make sure you're trained and motivated and have good working conditions. Maya Groff, international lawyer in The Hague, Leiden University Faculty of Governance and Global Affairs, convener of the Climate Governance Commission, and co-winner of a major international prize in 2018 on global governance. Would you like to add to those first two and then add in why should decision makers listen to people's opinions about the value of water? How can we balance decision making?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, David, and lovely to be here with everyone. So I was really fascinated by both of the report and the listening exercise, and I found them really encouraging that there were such multifaceted reflections that really built on each other. I guess I wanted to highlight in terms of this interplay between decision makers and stakeholders, the general public, youth, this principle of consultation, which is a core principle in the Baha'i faith and different faith traditions. For example, Gandhi suggested that everybody has a part of the truth. And I think this wonderful listening exercise really shows that there's really magnificent insights and also like a renewed sense of responsibility among individuals and communities to take care of this common resource. So I think this was a really lovely and inspiring exercise, which will bear a lot of fruit because both documents were really multifaceted, one more technical, obviously, but it's also part of this. You mentioned the Climate Governance Commission, but this is also part of our evolving, understanding of our role as a global human community on the planet. And how we have to use international cooperation. It's completely imperative We have to think in terms of our common humanity, and we have to have, at our core, in terms of our governance, really fundamental principles, such as justice, equity, moderation, respect, care, stewardship for natural resources. And as was mentioned, water is so integrated with climate, biodiversity. So this is also a really,
wonderful opportunity for all of us. So I'll just stop now, but I think both the content of the reports were really promising and fascinating, but also the process, the way it was approached.
Thank you, Maya. And there's no doubt, and I saw in one of the questions asking what was so challenging. Well, first of all, we have to recognize the UN system is a system, and it's got a lot of protocol and a lot of rules that govern it in the management of relations between all the member states and the dynamic between the agencies. That was one factor making it difficult. But another was, as was mentioned earlier, is that there was the challenge, given that everything is happening virtually, meaning digitally, that not everybody can connect in the same way, with the same ease, the same speed. So those two are the pillars of the challenges. And then the other part of the challenge is how to engage a global conversation on these virtual platforms, which on the one hand is easier because you don't have to be everywhere in person, but on the other hand is also more difficult because you're getting this onslaught of messages coming across the various platforms. It's something I think that that will be done again, and I think that it deserves more looking into, whether in water or other areas where we need serious collective action. Stephanie Smith, leader of the Zephyr Mangata consultancy that strengthens the community of global solutionaries. Now, I must admit, that's the first time I've heard the word solutionaries to make change. Stephanie has worked with the African Center for Aquatic Research and Education, Global Waterworks Connect, Water Rising Institute, and Drink Local, Drink Tap. Stephanie, can you share with us some of your thoughts on the three questions that we've heard towards the panel, please?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here today. What I'd like to just start out with is saying how much I appreciate the exercise. And the listening is so important. I also want to point out that we, of course, could not listen to and hear from everyone. And as the parent of teenagers, I want to just tap into also something I've seen in the comments here, is that we need to meet people where they're at. And in thinking about how we're doing this, how we're listening, one of the really important things is to think about that oftentimes the water community talks to itself. And so thinking about how we reach out beyond our own circle and how we're able to, as I said, meet people where we're looking for a cultural shift in many ways. What was so great about this report was that we could see that, in fact, really people could understand relatively complex concepts around water and the interconnections. So this is not out of people's realm of possibility for understanding, but it is a question of how broadly we're reaching, both with the education and awareness, but then also actions for opportunities for action. So when we have education and awareness, this is great. However, getting some really clear goals and clear actions for people to engage in, how can they help? How can they take part? How will their individual actions make a difference? This is so important because as we see these people, youth in particular, growing up, they're going to be the ones who are our next decision makers or who are influencing decision makers. So being able to really tap into those entities is super important. Just a quick moment to talk about some of my work on the African Great Lakes. That's 25% of the world's surface fresh water and such an important part of the world. And it was great to see a lot of activity and comments from that part of the world. There's a lot of opportunity for different innovation and with smart water, smart data to be able to tap into some of the solutions for our solutionaries to be able to take action and really make a difference in the world. So I'm thinking about the youth and the fact that over about 80% of the people who responded to this activity were 35 and older. So we really need to think about how we can tap into the youth, tap into that youth quake energy that we see for climate, that we see from the US in the Black Lives Matter movement, and thinking about certainly climate change globally, how that's happened. So with that, I will say thank you very much for the question, David.
Okay, 1 minute round per person. We'll go in the same order. I hate those people who say go in the reverse order, because then it gives the person who just spoke, they have to think all over again really quickly. So Tanya, I'm going to ask you from what you heard, what's your final thoughts to share with us as we move to the second session here, please?
Well, there's one thought that appeared also in the poll, that water is life. This was the predominant value of water. And given that water is life, it's probably one of the most undervalued natural resources. So we need to reevaluate water, and I think this should be part of a wider process of a systemic change, systemic transformation that needs to happen in terms of bringing a fundamental change to the way we produce, we consume, we live our lives, in terms of the way our economies are built, technological, social organization, and this includes also our values, our norms, our governance. So water reevaluation needs to be part of this transformative process. Otherwise, I don't think we will achieve what we really want to achieve, which is water secure world. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Tanya. Hasmik, over to you, please.
Thank you, David. We need to have, from my perspective, we need to have a complete understanding of the problems. For that, we all need to consider the transversal role of water, passing through all the sectors, and also through the link them to the Sustainable Development Goals, which I saw it was lacking in this listening exercise. People haven't emphasized that part, because, for example, in SDG for sustainable citizen communities, the role of water is undeniable. Also, day after day, these global water challenges are continuously rising the value of water. The policymakers and experts of the sector follow those developments and work on solutions, but the population in general is distant and is not on the same page. So the urgency of finding solutions and working together for common challenges need to be on the equal level of importance for decision makers, experts, industry, citizens, and in general for all stakeholders.
Thank you, Hasmik. Maja, over to you.
Thanks so much, David. Yeah, 2 quick points. Firstly, echoing a lot of the comments, or some of the really, I thought, persuasive comments this morning in the main event on how this issue also highlights global economic inequality and the need really for a much greater level of solidarity around the world to achieve SDG 6. And we have the wealth in the world. It's really just a matter of firmly shifting our collective priorities, which is absolutely related to the human rights dimension of this issue. And secondly, which came up with the younger women in the last panel, or one of the last panels this morning, about governance and gender equality and the role of women in leadership, which is so fundamental. And I've been looking at some interesting research recently that shows when more women are in legislatures or elected parliaments or similar bodies, there's greater environmental legislation, greater adhesion to environmental treaties, CO2 emissions actually drop also over time. So this is so fundamental to all of our ecological problems also.
Stephanie, top that if you can.
Great. So I just like to tap back into that idea of the issues being intersectional and interconnected, and the fact that we don't teach students in this way. We don't teach them to think about systems. So this is a shift that needs to happen from the educational standpoint, so that we can think about how those issues are connected. Water and climate we talk about, also racial justice, climate justice, these things are very deeply connected. And so when we see the systems and how they connect, we can see how this rising tide can lift many different boats. And that's something that's really important for us to think about, and how we interact with each other, but across sectors in different ways. And I would just like to close on this idea of incentivizing people to engage with the issues we're talking about. Is really important. We're competing with all kinds of things. I saw someone reference TikTok in the comments, and thinking about how our cultural influencers, whether that's TikTok or Minecraft, whatever that might be, how do we work outside of the environmental arena and tap into some of those cultural frameworks that help people think differently, act differently, and see opportunities, because we know that they do care. They know that water is life. How do we make that happen so that we can engage across the spectrum? Thanks.
Okay, David, your Twitter type concluding argument.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie, that you've given a challenge to the social media book group and task force to figure out how to put water on TikTok and other social media platforms that my 7-year-old knows, and I haven't the faintest clue what you're talking about, except people do a lot of goofy moves on them. Look, yesterday while I was working around the house, I was listening to a seminar by Thomas Piketty at the London School of Economics, and he's coming out with a new book on inequality. And he was very clear in his analysis, and we know he does hundreds of pages of empirical analysis, and it couldn't be more pertinent to what he's talking about as he looked at inequality over the centuries. And part of his conclusions were that we need more movement in the streets. We also, reading a blog where someone on water quoted the German philosopher Hegel, who said, "Doubts are not enough to initiate a change. It takes despair to do that." We see Fridays for Future. We need the similar type of movement for water. But one of the things that I've been saying to the water movement, and not successfully enough, so maybe I need help, is that the people engaged on water need to talk about global tax justice, need to talk about illicit financial flows, need to talk about the heavy debt burdens that sit on many developing countries, where 30, 40, 50% of public budgets are used to send to the banks in the north for oftentimes not very legitimate reasons. We in the water movement need to be much more aggressive in understanding that the political will not be created just by good words. It's got to be action. Lesha, thanks very much, and thanks to all the panelists. I think they were really, really good. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much, David, and all the 4 panelists. And before we go to the next panel, we have a little poll for you that we will hope you will answer. And the ladies in the backgrounds, and don't underestimate them, I will pull this up. 4 suggestions. But also, if you have other suggestions that we haven't thought of at all, because these ones are more or less at the, I would say at the global level, but we're happy to also hear suggestions at the local level, regional level, anything you can come up with that can help in set the stage for future action. So please fill in the poll. You go through the questions and then you push the button at the end that says submit. I think it's very interesting, and I'm actually quite pleased with that, that a lot of you said, okay, we have to talk to our own contacts in our own government and make a connection there. And some of you may be aware that there's a big consultation going on at the moment between the European Union and a lot of the developing countries on future funding. And one of the chances to actually make them do something about water is actually that debate, that discussion. So go and call them, email them, sit on their doorstep, and do something about it. I think another very clear one is to try and see if we can do some joint sessions on the topic in the near future, in August in the Stockholm Water Week, and next year in the World Water Forum. So all of you who are interested in participating in that or having ideas about that, let us know. We'll see how we can incorporate that, how we can manage that. Not going to be an easy thing, but because one of the questions asked was, why was it so challenging to do the listening exercise? Well, I'll tell you, because we were so happy with all these people responding, but it also takes an enormous amount of time to read and follow up on it and actually be respectful of your comments and come back to you. So this is not a thing that one or two people can do. And others, please suggest whatever suggestions you have. So with that, I will close this poll and I will go to the next panel. And we're extremely honored to have with us Caliste Tindimugaya from Uganda. He's head of the Water Resource Planning and Department of the Ministry in Uganda. He is one of my, I hope I can say that, Caliste, friends.
No problem.
Because he is a real champion for water in a country that doesn't have an easy life when it comes to water. I think you basically have everything. You have too much, too little, and too polluted. You're next to some of the biggest lakes in the world and have to manage that as well. And I know you have a lot of wisdom when it comes to water management and the value of water for your country, but also for your region. So I'm extremely happy to give you the floor and maybe ask the same question that David started with. What was it that struck you in the conclusions in the official report and in the listening exercise when it comes to the value of water? Was there something missing, or did you recognize it all, or what would be your estimate on that? You have the floor, Caliste.
Thank you very much, Moderator Alicia. First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel and the organizers. Yes, as I think has already been mentioned, when you look at the listening exercise in particular, you clearly note that people know what they want. And oftentimes we think we know better what they want. And I think what has come out clearly is that people are saying water is life. And I think for us, we need to unpack what life means. I think people don't have food, then there's no life. If they don't have water to drink, there's no life. If they don't have jobs, there's no life. If they don't have money in their pockets. So for me, I think what has come out speaks very, very loudly to us that the people know what they want. And I think oftentimes we don't deliver that message to them. So it was a surprise in a way to see that the things that have come out from the listening exercise. And I'm happy that they have come from the people, and I think they challenge us to make sure that we respond to the needs of the people. And I think what came out also closely, I think in the conclusion, is that it's a two-way. We have dialogue with the people, listen to them, we don't just speak to them and tell them that we know what they want. So that's what I can say for now. I think it was very insightful and I think challenging as well, that we shouldn't just look at water simplistically. We should put it in those broad values people look at so that they can contribute actively to safeguarding the water. Thank you.
So if you hear all that and see all that, what would be the first instinct, the first thing you would like to do as a government? How would you respond to that?
Thank you very much. Just to mention actually that today morning we had a dialogue on World Water Day, and we had also a session on varying water and environment resources. So again, what came out from here, and I think what I can share with the listeners is we need to put some value to water. In all of these values, sometimes we say water is important socially, culturally, but people will say, so what? So I think what we need to do, we need to make an attempt at, first of all, getting people to know how much water do we have and how is it distributed and how is it changing over time. But then how is this water being used? For example, cultural values. Do people even know how much water is contributing to the cultural aspects? What about socially? But also in terms of job creation, and for us, our country, the challenge we're having right now is we have a population of the youth which don't have jobs. So one of the things we are saying is, can water contribute to job creation? But how much are we already doing? Does any of us even know how much water is actually contributing to job creation or income? So one of the things of trying to put a value to all of these aspects in terms of the messages people can understand. I know it is not easy, but I think we can't run away from it. And then go forward and communicate this to the policymakers. And we have also been discussing that the policymakers actually don't understand these issues. We think water is important, but for them, they look at it as a God-given resource that is available, which people can use the way they want without even much care. So I think the ball is in our court. Water has various values. We need to speak to each other and create that critical mass so that we can tell a compelling story.
Okay, so if I put that in my words, you're saying, I would say two main messages. One, we have to explain, inform people what the value of water is, not just in their backyard, but in general, in the economics, in social aspects, in job creation. And the second one is, how do we even involve the youth more, especially also when it comes to jobs. One of the previous speakers, I can't remember whether it was just now or this morning, said there was a lot of very good advice in the World Water Development Report 2016 on water and jobs. And maybe we have to go and revisit that and see what we learned from it and what every one of us, including the governments, can do. Thank you for that, Caliste. And having said that, I'm going to challenge Richard O'Connor. Richard is a very special guest today because he is the editor-in-chief of the World Water Development Report. He probably knows every comma and things they deleted or put back in that report. And for me, there would be two questions to you, Richard. One, was there anything that was a surprise to you in your own report? And was there a surprise when you compared it to the listening exercise? So, Richard, yeah, I know.
Thanks, Lesha.
Floor is yours, my dear.
Hello, everybody. Pleasure to be here. I have to apologize. I'm working from home like everybody else is, and there's major works outside. I've tried to close my windows as much as possible, but so I apologize if the audio is a little bit difficult. Okay, I have a very limited time, so Lesha, your first question. what's new here. All of the interventions have been very, very, very interesting. With Calist's last one, I'd like to add on to it, because identifying the different values of water is, and this goes to your first question, is what did we find out? The first thing is we're expecting, for instance, just in the question of infrastructure, we would imagine that there is a evaluation protocol. You know, you're going to put 20 or 200 million dollars into building a dam. So you figure that if it's from the World Bank or another, international investment bank, that you'd have this protocol that it's like, okay, what is the values? And basically, what is the costs and what are the benefits? And they would have a cost benefit analysis. And it turns out that it's just on a project by project basis. And this is the one surprise that we really had, that they don't have that. It's really on a project by project basis. And the second, we were expecting to be able to perhaps come up with some sort of methodology to, or at least give some advice on a methodology to value water, to have some sort of put something together that it's like, okay, a tick list. And no, that doesn't really happen. The difference between, for instance, there's so many different ways to value water. There's water and sanitation. There is the water resource, and the environment. There's the infrastructure that you need to deliver it. And then, of course, the cultural values. And to try to put that all together and to create this sort of central or manifested methodology or approach seems to be a little bit not necessarily achievable. However, all of these perspectives do need to be taken into consideration. And I appreciate the comments from Hasmik, for instance, that you have to have a multiple value approach in terms of governance. So the more of these different perspectives that you have, the better that you can make decisions. And so to have these multiple perspectives, you need to embrace the fact that to include multiple stakeholder perspectives. And I think from this listening exercise, that's probably the most, for me, it's the clearest message that is coming out. That you need to have, I'm sorry, there's stuff in the background, but that you need to have, give in a governance context, that you need to have, including more stakeholder involvement. And I think of one of the things that are common with the listening exercise and the WWDR, this is probably the one that is the strongest connection.
Okay, Rick, I take 3 points from what you just said. One is that you're surprised that the biggest funders in the world have not figured out a procedure yet how to value the different aspects of water in a processing way yet. So that might be one of the big calls to them to start thinking about it. I think the second one is that the methodology to actually balance all these different values in decision making doesn't really exist yet. So that's a nice challenge to the academics. And that we have to continue in looking how to involve the voices of all these stakeholder groups when it comes to reporting on the stage of where our waters are. And I guess that's also a challenge for you and your team and your colleagues. But you know, a lot of these people who are now online are quite happy to support that. Having said that, I would like to go to Asha. Asha lives in Kenya. Asha is a professionally an ICT specialist, but she's also extremely involved in anything that has to do with water, women's involvement, agriculture, forestry. I mean, the list is endless. And Asha, I thought it was really nice that you wanted to be on the list as the Women Water Ambassador, because I think you're really one of them. So please, Asha, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Lesha. Thank you very much, everybody. I've been listening to this and it's very interesting, especially from the government side of it. I will give you my perspective from the ground because people on the ground value water differently, especially in Africa. We have a lot of water scarcity and maybe floods, but when it comes to involving the person on the ground, nobody really pays attention to what they say. Nobody really involves them, and especially the women who carry the water and go for miles to fetch the water. I live in an urban town, the center of Nairobi. There are times when we have no water at all. And that particular time, the quality of water doesn't matter. You will call a browser, you're not going to ask for the certificate so long as you have water in the house, because then nothing moves. So you can imagine if your life has to move because of water, how important it is in your life and how much you value it. Because the moment there's no water, nobody has peace. And then we are looking also at how we pollute our waters. We are the ones who pollute the water sources. So when we get unclean water, most of it is because from human. So to cascade this information down from the government, from the policy makers to the people on the ground, that's what it is very important, because the moment they own the process, then they know we are part of it. We are not, climate change does not exist in the air. We are the ones who are causing it. So what we are doing on the ground is really talking to the people, getting them. At one time, I was very interested when, surprised when somebody was asking me, you have this project of water catchment from the roofs and the water tanks. What's the big deal? I said, you know, the woman has no water. The moment she has water from the roof, it doesn't matter what it is, but there is water when she opens her door. She will focus on other things, economically, politically, and everything. So water is very important. I was listening about the youth. The youth involvement is very, very vital because we find very young people being sent to look for water, carrying little bottles of water. But the moment you make them understand, they're the future leaders. They're the ones who will go back and ensure there is access to quality, affordable water. Because you may have water, but it's not affordable. Then you'll end up drinking unsafe water. Having said this, we need to ensure the quality of water is safe and it is accessible and affordable and everybody can access it, because water is life. Water is not only for human beings, for the biodiversity to exist. I sit in the United Nations Environment Program meetings, and it is very important for us to understand that water is not only a human resource, it is a life resource for everything which is on earth. And also for us to make sure that we have rains coming down. I hope that's enough. Lesha, we want me to put a little bit more?
No, my darling, this is wonderful. And I'm also running a little bit out of time. So I'm asking permission of everybody who's online to continue a bit more. And having said that, I'm going to Ben. Ben, please.
Yeah.
What would be your biggest surprise and your biggest comment?
Thanks very much, Lesha. Well, it's a privilege to be amongst so many water experts. My background is in the climate change sphere and specifically around investing capital flows into climate finance. And I suppose what really struck me from this report is, some of the statistics that water and sanitation infrastructure will need to be around $0.9 to $1.5 trillion per annum to provide the water infrastructure that's needed globally. In the climate finance sphere, we talk a lot about mobilizing and aligning global capital flows with the goals of the Paris Agreement. And so I suppose that would be my biggest comment, is that to get to that 0.9 to 1.5 trillion, we have to mobilize global capital flows towards water infrastructure in the way that we're doing it for climate finance. At the moment, we're spending something like $500 to $600 billion per annum on climate mitigation and adaptation. That needs to go to $2.5 trillion per annum or plus. So, we have an equivalent challenge for the water sector here. I mean, the good news, I suppose, is that the investment community is starting to coalesce around certain tenets. There has clearly been a massive dislocation, I think, between the financial community and society in general, but we are starting to see some movement towards sort of a resolution between those two stakeholder groups. We're seeing things like the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment. We're seeing increased asset management and asset owners, pension funds and so forth, signing up to things like the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance. We're seeing the increased mapping of UN SDGs, including UN SDG 6, into the way that investment works. But we really have to sort of expedite this capital flow towards water in the way that we have seen beginning with climate change. I'll leave it there, Lesha.
Ben, can you maybe say that in 2 bullet points, because I'm not completely sure I understood you.
So in 2 bullet points, climate finance is getting a lot of attention. We're seeing increased movement towards attention in the climate sphere. We need to increase attention from investors globally to achieve the 0.9 to 1.5 trillion dollars that we need to solve the water crisis.
And make sure it reaches the right people, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, Sarah, please. Sarah works for the World Wildlife Fund. She's based in Washington, D.C. And she has 2 big features. One is that she works a lot on transboundary water resource management in the basins. And the other one is that she's also a member of the Gender Task Force of UNESCO WWP. And I'm sure she has some very important stuff to share with us on both reports. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Lesha. Thanks, everyone. And I know I stand between us and the closing of the event, so I'll try to be brief, but there's been a lot that my fellow panelists and others have said that I think is really valuable. I think that to me, Stephanie brought up this point of the connections, and I think a lot of that is what's really key. How do we make those connections so that decisions are being made in a way that doesn't prioritize one value over another. I was thinking about it this morning. I think probably in the end, the role of the decision makers that we would love to see is taking kind of all of this input, all of this knowledge that we're kind of represented in this Water to Me campaign and movement and discussion, and thinking about what that means to implement a water for us, right? So it's pulling together the perspectives on each of these. And it's fine that what each of us value and what we think of when we think of water, when we think of rivers and lakes and aquifers may be different. The tricky thing is that making decisions and planning and investing that prioritizes or is focused on one or the others of those is really likely to leave out some of the most creative solutions, but lets us hopefully, there are always trade-offs to be made, right? But lets us bring some of the most creative solutions to the table so that we can have water for food, water for biodiversity, drinking water, safe, clean drinking water, right? And I think some key lessons there are really about allowing ourselves and our decision makers to zoom out. So this means both geographically speaking. I think a lot of times, we see decisions being made with political boundaries in mind. That's not the way water works. We all know that, right? So allowing us to zoom out to the scale that makes sense for water, and therefore all of the decisions that are influenced by that. So the basin scale, when we're talking about rivers, will allow a lot more creativity, and to Richard's point about decisions being made on kind of a project by project basis, zooming out thematically also, right? So that we allow ourselves, the freedom to think about energy or drinking water safety, so that we can think about source water protection is protecting the ecosystems going to make more sense than point of use that also gets us food security with healthy fish populations, right? We can really see the balance of these things when we give ourselves that space to zoom out and make decisions at that scale.
Okay, Sarah, thank you so much. I wish we had a whole afternoon after this, and I could go back to all of our panelists. I've heard enormously interesting comments. I tried to follow what was in the chat, and there wasn't. I think a lot of them were comments to actually enhance our discussion. So we'll see how we can actually come back to you in some kind of a follow-up action to use everything that you said. And having said that, because we're running out of time, and I know this is going to happen because there's so much to talk about, I want to hand over back to Neil to sort of give the last comments and see how we go further. Neil, floor is yours.
Thanks, Lesha. Hi, everyone. Thank you, first of all. We've still got 141 people on. I just wanted to, first of all, thank the panelists for coming on. I really appreciate it. And this is a more diverse panel than I've seen in the water sector event for a very, very long time. So thank you very much for that. Secondly, I want to thank everyone who's a participant who contributed to #WaterToMe. And I think some of you I've had conversations on, and that's what it was all about. I want to stress on behalf of UN Water and Aquafed and Women for Water, and basically the water sector, the institution that is the water sector, thank you very much for taking the time and giving us your opinions. We really, really appreciated it. You do not understand how much, because I know particularly David and I kind of stuck our neck out a bit saying we should do this. And there were some detractors at first, and they thought, oh, really? Why do you want to do that? The reason is very clear, and it's in the messages that you've given us. So thank you very much. And David and I both also never wanted it to just stop today. We saw this as the start of something. And what it is, it's the start of a really, a much more solidified and direct channel between you, users on the ground, people like Asha, for example, right up to the UN. And it's up to us to keep making sure that that happens. Now, I'll get off my soapbox, but I just wanted to sort of talk about quickly the thing that jumped out for me more than anything else was youth, quite honestly. That was the thing that came up so many times in this discussion. I was really fascinated by what, as the panelists were talking about the conversation between Brianna and I think it's Chao, I think it's from Brazil. And Chao, forgive me, I can't pronounce your name properly. I hope I've got it right. But you were saying we've got to stop using the word "we must" because you're quite frankly bored of hearing that. And trust me, so am I. Okay. And this was about actually now youth taking control of this issue. Stephanie has made some very clear points about how to do it. And that's why I was glad she came on. You've got to go to where the youth are at. So if there's one point I think we take away as an action, and certainly Aquafed, because I'm the director, I pledge right now, this idea about trying to understand how to communicate with youth properly, we're going to take that on. And if you're with me and you want to help me on this, let's do it. Okay, because I think it's really, really vital that we pick up on this. The other message that really stuck out very quickly was Callist's message, actually. And he said, let's go back to basics in terms of helping people understand the issues about water, making sure they understand it. Because, you know, on one level, yes, this water to me showed that people do have are able to make these connections. And I think Maya said it at the beginning, or Tanya, one of you two, you said this point that people have made the connections between water and food and the environment. So people are not stupid, okay? People understand this very, very well. Now we've just got to help them, and I'm talking their language now, and help them make improvements on where they are. So, but so that, I think that was a very great point. Ben, you know, he's given us the facts really. He brought us back to reality a lot in terms of where the amount of investment that's required. You know, we can agree or disagree on how we get that money, but the we need 1.5 trillion per annum is there. So we can either start arguing with each other for the next 10 years, whether it should be public, private, capital, whoever, or we can just get on with it. Okay, that's the way I see it. So one action I'll take away, Lesha, from this very much is I'm going to start a work stream about communicating with young people better. Minecraft, YouTubers, all these things that I think, again, even David said as well, he doesn't get it, and nor do I. I'm far too old for this stuff, but it's time to engage our kids with it. Lesha, back to you. And again, thank you everyone from all over the world for taking part in this. And this is the start, I promise, not the end.
Thanks very much, Neil. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Also, how you moderated the previous session with the formal presentation. That was very well done. I apologize for everybody who didn't get additional time to talk, because you all have so much good stuff to share and to tell and to ask. And the same as Neil and David, Women for Water wants to keep facilitating this kind of processes as much as we can. Just like PSI and Aquafed, we're a partner of UN Water, and we'll certainly will have other conversations with Rick. Thank you very much for being there. To see how we can, you know, make this happen a little bit more, and see how we can incorporate this type of discussion into the annual reports, because I think that's a very important issue. Thank you, Marlos and Art, and Tanya and Caliste, because you were brave enough to come and visit us and talk about all this. And we collectively are counting on you to do also continuing this conversation and see how we can take it forward. Having said all that, we will make a record. You know, we recorded this. We will make that recording available to everybody. We'll try and summarize everything that was in the chat box, and we apologize for every question we didn't answer, but hope to be able to do that in future and see all of you again, either in person or online for the next round. And bring this very important value of water to all of us further. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much, all of you, and goodbye.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Lesha.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Well done, everybody. Happy Water Day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Happy World Water Day.
Thank you.